Dear seekers in the divine, today we will discuss practices to absolute happiness. The scriptures, there have been many scriptures, and scriptures have written so many practices, so many methods, so many ways to achieve that absolute happiness. Some of them call it God, some of them call it pure awareness, some of them call it by various names. They all mean the same thing, because words within the dualistic language are only pointers. Truth is. So, from the perspective of practices, because one wants to seek happiness, what are the methods? So there are various methods for the mind to be quietened down. The important thing to note is that the reason for all the methods and the practices is because the mind is always full of activity, going up and down, all the time flitting from object to object, jumping from object to object, and all the time in a state of fluctuation. When this is the case, there is always attachment. There is always this doership that I am doing it. There is always a personhood, this, me. And there are various personalities attached to this. I am so and so. I am a father, I am a mother, I am a teacher, I am a scientist, I am a doctor, I am a electrician, I am an artist, etc., etc. But these are all personalities on the substratum of the truth, which is pure awareness. And these personalities arise when there is personhood, when there is doership. When the mind gets quietened down, because mind is only a combination and accumulation of thoughts in consciousness. So when this mind is quietened down, revelation happens of the truth. So how do we then try and quieten down the mind? That's wherein comes all the various scriptures, all the methods. But the fact is, the reality is that, please remember, dear seekers, one does not need to attain anything. One does not need to actually find and achieve something, because there is no achievement. It is your true nature to be happy, because you are happiness itself. So how do we then achieve this quietness of the mind? One method which has been described in detail is service, karma yoga. One serves society selflessly, without expectations. Because the moment there is expectation, there is disappointment. Whenever there is expectation, there is a bolstering of the ego. There is strengthening of the ego. Because I want to do this or do that. When service is done without any attachments. The left hand should not know what the right hand is doing, as it were. When this sort of service is done, the mind quietens down, actions happen. And slowly the ego settles down. The mind gets thinned out. The other method is cosmic love. Cosmic love. Love of the divine. Love of the preceptor. Love of your deity. Love of the supreme. Wherein the love takes over your entire life and your entire life is offered unto the divine. When that happens, there is no one there, because everything is offered. The ego is offered. The mind is offered. When that is done, there is no I. And one is completely immersed in divine cosmic love. Many have attained it through this practice. Because love is natural. It may start off with infatuation, that sort of love, but then one has to transcend that and get into the love for humanity, and then love for the cosmos, love for all. That is that cosmic love. Then there are other practices called the yoga, Ashtanga yoga, eightfold path of yoga, Patanjali Yoga Sutras, where they enumerate the various paths: yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, pratyahar, dharana, dhyana, samadhi. So there are various methods given. How you control the senses, control the mind, control the body, as in yoga asanas. Then pratyahar, where you control the senses and bring the senses, the attention of the senses from the objects are brought in and reconciled with the very source from where the senses arose. Pratyahar. And dharana is concentration, where one sits in a steady pose and concentrates. When that concentration becomes deeper and deeper, it resolves into meditation. And then there is a release into that absolute awareness. You never were the limited. You always were that absolute, unlimited, pure consciousness, pure awareness. And then you have Jnana Yoga, Jnana Yoga, inquiry, the path of inquiry, where you seek within. Because the outward is always in the field of duality, in the field of manifestation, where happiness can be found, but it is only temporary happiness. There is always the perceiver and the perceived, the object, the subject and the object, and the process. But when that attention of seeking happens not outward but happens inward, inquiry begins. Because does one always think that one will attain anything outside? One has always been seeking outside, always been trying to find happiness. There's nothing wrong in finding happiness in the outer world, but it will be only temporary. It will never be permanent. Because this changing world is always the part of the changeless, is part of the changeless. And the changeless is your true nature. What is the point in getting engrossed in the changing, which is only a part of the changeless? There is no difference between the changeless and the changing. But the changeless appears to be limited because one gets engrossed in it. When the seeking happens inwards, the changeless is revealed as pure awareness, that absolute happiness. Try it, dear seekers. Go within, because the perceiver is changeless. That awareness is changeless. A small exercise is when one of you all does an action and an action is performed, the action happens. But the action is done by the hands, or the action is done by the legs, or action is done by some part of the body. The perceiver is different. You perceive the hands moving. When thoughts are taking place in the mind, the thoughts are perceived as taking place. The perceiver is different. In both these instances, the change is happening in the hands, the change is happening in the mind as thoughts flitting from object to object. But please note that the perceiver as pure awareness remains changeless. Let that sink in. You are that very nature, that perceiver as pure awareness. Even now, right now, all the movements, all the mind fluctuations, all the thoughts, all the agitations, all the impulses are the changing within changeless, within the changeless. And you are that changeless. That Parabrahma Tattva, that Satchit Ananda, that absolute existence, absolute consciousness, absolute bliss, that you are, that you were, that you are, that you always will be. The body comes, body goes. The mind comes, mind goes. But you as pure awareness, absolute happiness, remains as that changeless silence in the eternity of consciousness. That is the truth. That is the only truth. And that is the only truth. Oh.